Okay, so let's get started. So thank you everyone for joining us tonight. It's a pleasure to have you. My name is Rafi Shulman and I'm from Olim Advisors. I'd like to just take a moment and introduce the two other moderators that are joining us tonight, Darren Rich and Selwyn Hare. Both of them are from Home in Israel, Keller Williams. Thank you guys for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Rafi. Nice to be on here with you.
Amazing. We have over 200 people that have registered from around the world. So a massive number. And I always get so excited. I always get so inspired when I see people who are joining from North America and South America, South Africa, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, Australia. Everyone's coming together really because two things. One is because we love Israel and because we want to have a good life here in Israel. And so what we have done is really come together to share with you information about buying a home in Israel. Before we get into the content, what I'd like to just do is take a moment and just go over a couple of things. First of all, we are going to have a Q&A session at the end, so feel free to put your questions in the chat box, the Q&A box, and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can later on. The second thing is we will have our contact information at the end, and we encourage you, we invite you to reach out to us because this is such a big decision. There's so much involved. It's a lot of money, of course, and there's no way for us to get into the details as they apply to each one of you. You know, we're going to share a lot of information with you, but everyone has their own situation. Everyone has their own concerns, their own questions, their own doubts. And so we want to have these one-on-one conversations with you where we can really understand what you're looking for and figure out how we can help you. So feel free to reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to help you. And the last thing is we are going to be sending out an email within the next couple of days with the recording. So if you've come late or you have to leave early, don't worry about it. We're not going to hold it against you. We'll send out an email and you can watch the webinar. You can share the webinar. Really what we want to do is we want to help as many people as possible. So feel free to do that. Before we get started with the content, I just wanted to take a couple of moments and explain to you who we are and why we're here. So let's go back in time a little bit, back to 2016 when we started Olim Advisors. And our goal was to encourage, to help, to inspire people to make Aliyah and to come to Israel. A lot of people that we were talking to have been thinking about it and dreaming about it and wanting to do it for so many years, but they just didn't know what they needed to do. They didn't know what the game plan looked like. And so what we do is we talk to everyone and we figure out what are their goals, what are their needs, what are their desires, and really together with the Olim, help them put together a plan so that they can take these desires, take this dream and turn it into a reality. Then once people get here, we roll up our sleeves and we work with them, we support them, we help them deal with the bureaucracy, we help them deal with the bank and the government agencies, with the big challenges and the little challenges, everything that really comes up that people just have some difficulty. We're their go-to, we're their support team, and we really find that it makes such a big difference in people's experience in people's life here in Israel. And so that's what we've been focusing on since 2016. And more recently, we got into real estate and we expanded into real estate because we realized that having a home in Israel is in essence the most important part of having a successful, happy life in Israel. Whether you're buying a home or you're renting a home, you want to make sure that you have something that meets your needs. And so this is something that Olim Advisors now does. We have a team that really guides people through this process because buying a home in Israel is very different from the States or Australia or South Africa or from wherever you might be from. And so we want to help you choose the communities. We want to help you find your home. We want to help you work with the right people. And that's the other thing that we do is that we've put together, we've assembled a team of professionals like Darren, like Selwyn, who really go above and beyond, who really care about the people that they're helping. And together, we want to help you find the home. So whether it's a realtor, a real estate lawyer, a mortgage broker, a banker, whatever you need, we have it either as part of our immediate team or extended team to really help you go through this process and find the home that you're looking for. So we're all very excited to be here. We're looking forward to helping you. And with that, Darren and Selwyn, I'll hand it over to you to go through the information.
Okay, thanks, Rafi. So I'll just give you guys a little bit of an insight to home in Israel. We are a real estate brokerage. We are also a franchise of the Keller Williams international brand for Netanya. We at present have 20 agents who work in our office, each specializing in their own specific field, be it rentals, be it resale and purchases, or property management. We've been in the real estate game for the last 18 years and serving the international community with buying and maintaining homes in Israel. Sorry about that one. So that's very much of what we're all about. Part of our story is we try and provide a one-stop shop. In other words, that we provide all your real estate needs under one roof, whether it's a lawyer, whether it's a mortgage broker, whether it's an interior designer, insurance broker, all the things that will go together with the real estate will all come under, will fall under our umbrella, and we can help you and we can hold your hand throughout the whole process. The actual process, as Rafi mentioned earlier, the actual aliyah in itself is a difficult process. So we're here to at least make one thing slightly easier for you, and that is the actual purchase of a home, your home in Israel. Darren?
I think you're muted. There you go.
Yeah, oh, good. Okay, hello everybody. Well, it's good morning or good evening. Okay, so where are we now? We're on slide 2. We're on moving forward now, correct? Rafi, slide 2?
Yeah, the slide is the recent trends and the reasons for changing the market is the first slide that we have for you.
Fine. Okay. Thanks, we're all coming to the end of Corona now. And we've had 2 challenging years everywhere. The Israeli real estate market it thrived. Nobody quite knew what to expect, but for the first month or so, nobody knew what COVID was and what to expect. And then all of a sudden, the market started again, and demand completely outdid the supply. This was for renting and for purchasing, and this resulted in a lot of the prices increasing and increasing. And in many places, you saw a 10-15% increase in value, and in some places even more. And the amount of building new construction simply isn't enough to fulfill the demand. And that was even prior to COVID, and it hasn't changed. It's still the same. So now we're almost at the end of COVID, and people are able to come back to Israel, where for 2.25 years they weren't able to. And the prices have increased, and rentals has increased, and it's now reached a level where it's plattered off a little bit. It hasn't dropped, and it's not expected to drop. It's just reached a new level. That's where we are at the moment. Whether it's in Netanya or Hare or Beersheba, the same trend has been throughout the whole country.
I'd just like to elaborate a little bit on what you've just said, Darren, and that is, when we're talking about the trend, we've always got to realize there are a few main issues which will always cause the markets to go up or down, and that's supply and demand. And as we know, when we're talking about just natural growth of the population, Israel needs between 60 and 80,000 new dwellings every year. And the market is only producing between 30 and 40,000, or let's say before COVID, 40 and 50,000. And then came COVID. So developers didn't know what to do. Developers were scared to start new builds. So the whole new building process, the new dwellings, dropped even more so during COVID. So then that has actually caused us to get to a stage that now where our supply and demand are completely unproportionable. Now, over and above that, if we think about that's just the local market. Now, let's look about what's been happening around the world. We have Jews around the world who want their own piece of Israel. So they're also buying into Israel. I'm going to go back and going to see the way Israel handled COVID. And the way Israel handled COVID made even more people wanting to make Aliyah, wanting to have their own piece of Israel. So that also brought the number of buyers up into the market. So your actual supply, instead of increasing, actually went down, and the number of buyers just went up. So when that happens, that's the story. That's basically what's going to happen to the market.
Right. And we're seeing that as well, not just from people who are making Aliyah, but also from investors or people who live around the world that just want a home in Israel. God forbid something happens and they want to be able to have a home here. They want to be able to come here. And so I think for the reasons that Darren and Selwyn mentioned, we are seeing an increase in demand across the board. It's not just in one specific city, it's really throughout the country. And so, now is definitely the time, and things seem to be getting, the market seems to be heating up even further. So, okay. The question is really, where should you live? Some people know exactly where they want to move to, and other people really don't have an idea. And there are a few factors that go into the decision that we want to briefly go over. The first and foremost is affordability. Israel as a whole, as we talked about, is expensive. And in fact, many of you might know that Tel Aviv just a few months ago was recognized as the most expensive city in the world to live. So just to give you an idea of what we're talking about. But there are cities that are more affordable. There are neighborhoods in certain cities that are more affordable. And so affordability is really going to be a big driver behind the decision. I think we would all love to live in a penthouse overlooking the Mediterranean Sea in Tel Aviv, but, unless you have $10 million plus, that's just not an option. And so that's one thing that I would recommend that you do, is really think through the numbers. And it's not just about, the overall cost of it. It's the down payment, right? Excuse me. And then it's also the monthly mortgage payments if you're doing that. So affordability is a big factor. The other one is what I call the personality of the community. Whether you want to live in a religious community, a secular community, maybe a mix. Do you want a large Anglo bubble, we call it? Do you want a Ramat Bet Shemesh or Modi'in or Ra'anana? Or do you want more of a multicultural? Netanya, I think, is a perfect example of people from around the world that, are ending up in Netanya. Or do you want something that has more of an Israeli flavor to it? So having that mix, knowing what you like, what you prefer is important. Then, of course, weather. There's a big difference and discrepancy between the weather down south in Beersheba, for example, or the weather up north in Hare. And so, that's a factor that you need to think about. For families, schools is probably the number one, driver. That, and of course, affordability. A lot of people that we help want to first find the schools, and then they'll find a home near the schools. So that's something that you really need to think about. If you want schools, for the near future, for the long term, that will very often drive the decision as to where you want to live. Now, keep in mind that people and kids do bus, and so you could live in one community, and your child could hop on a bus, whether it's organized by the school or just a public transportation, and travel for 20 minutes, 30 minutes outside of your community to a school. So it's not the be all and end all that you have to live in the same community where the school is, but you do want to keep that in mind. The next thing is proximity to family. Some people want to live near their kids and grandkids, and they want to have the support. Other people want to live far away from their family. So, you really need to think about, if you do have family here and friends, do you want to live near them? That's a factor that a lot of people think about. The next one is, again, more from a financial point of view, but also quality of life. Do you need to live near where you're going to work? And the infrastructure here in Israel is very different from other countries where people are accustomed to traveling for an hour and a half to work. Here, if you have to go 20, 30 kilometers, that could take you an hour. And so a lot of people want to live near where they work. Now, one of the big impacts that Corona had is that more people can work remotely. And so people are now looking more at the periphery. They're looking up north and they're looking down south because they know that they don't necessarily have to go into work every day. And so that opens up the options. It also, makes affordable communities more of a reality. So, thinking through that is an important factor as well. Public transportation, is important because, especially if you're retired, and this is something that we see for people who want to retire in Israel or who are retired already, and they don't want to drive. They want to be able to hop on a train, hop on a bus. Having that infrastructure, and Israel now is finally woken up and is trying to do something about it by building more trains and more buses, having more buses. You want to make sure that you have the ability to just hop on a bus and go to where you want to go, whether it's community schools, whether it's the libraries, social activities, being able to either walk to these places or to be able to get these places easily is an important part. And I'll just end this by really giving you a suggestion that somebody shared with me once is, if you close your eyes and you think about what you would see when you walk out of your home, whether it's a building or a private home, what do you see? Do you see urban environment? Do you see a suburban? Do you see a moshav or a kibbutz? If you can kind of visualize that, that will help us, it will help Selwyn and Darren, help you find the community and help you find the home that's most suitable for your needs. So a few things to keep in mind. Hopefully you found that helpful. Okay, buying on paper or resale. So Darren and Selwyn, can you see the slide?
Selwyn, you're on mute.
Okay, there we go. Sorry, guys, I'd muted myself. Okay, so when we're doing a purchase, we've got to make a decision: are we buying on paper or are we buying a resale? So there are a lot of pros and cons to each of which. So I'm just going to touch on a few issues regarding the purpose of the actual purchase. So when you're buying a home, you're actually got to decide, what is the purpose of my home? Is it because I'm intending making aliyah, or I am making aliyah? Is it going to be an investment? Is it going to be a holiday home? Or is it going to be secure for a security reason? For one day, if I have to, I have somewhere where to go. Or we have the thing of what we call an all of above. Like most of us do have, we have 5 people, we'll have six opinions. So here it is as well. We have all of the above, but somehow we still got to try and fit in and see what we're actually looking to do. So if the idea is to make aliyah, when you're making aliyah, a new development's going to give you more time to prepare. As far as resale, you can get it. You'll get occupation sooner, but you'll be able to rent it out and maybe even generate some income until such time as you make aliyah. If we're doing it as an investment, we've got to remember that when you're buying off plan, you're going to have no yield until completion. On the other hand, you're going to have a higher capital appreciation, because when you're buying a resale, it's going to do what the market determines is what the property is going to do. Whereas in a new development, you're actually going to get, when you're buying, and especially you get in very early, and you get in when the building is still on the right in the beginning stages of it, your market appreciation, your capital appreciation is going to be very much higher. If it's as a holiday home, well, you can plan for the futures. You can do your own renovations. You can make the apartment suit what you want it. It's an apartment that could be a 4-room, and you want to make it, you only need a 2-bedroom or a 2-room apartment or a 3-room. You can make it, you can make the apartment yourself. Whereas in a resale, you're actually going to have to do a renovation. You're going to have somebody actually breaking down walls, doing whatever and things like that. Well, as far as the security and all of the, when we talk about all of the above, it's more of a personal decision which needs to be made. Another big difference as far as a new development and a resale, which I'll get into a little bit later, is regarding the purchase tax aspect of buying an apartment, but we're talking about that later in the webinar.
And one other thing also to add here is that if you're buying something on paper or on blueprints, then you have the opportunity to pay. There's a payment plan, so to speak, where you put down X% down and then you can pay it over some time. The advantage of that is, of course, from a cash flow point of view, for many people, that's advantageous. The downside of that is very often you're tied to the building index. And in Israel, most developers will tie the payment plan to the building index, which up until recently didn't amount to that much, but now, especially during Corona, there were some months where it was 0.5%, 0.6%, 0.7% per month. So if you do the math, that's something that you're paying above and beyond the costs of your home. So just a couple of additional financial factors for you to keep in mind.
Yeah, that's actually part of the next slide. So if we go on to the next slide, we can now actually take a look at the more the financial side of the pros and cons of buying a new development or when buying a resale. So if I'm buying a new development, as you said, you have stages. You'll have stage payments. So your payments can be made over the period of the building, which can be for 3 months, for 6 months, or if it's a 3-year process, it can be done every 6 months. Whereas in a resale, your completion can be anything from 2 to 3 months, even to 6 months. So you've got to be much more liquid. You've got to be liquid. You've got to be hands-on. You've got to have all your T's crossed, all your I's dotted, and you've got to be ready to go. Another big difference between a resale as opposed to a new development, on a resale, you've got to be hands-on. We have people that are saying, oh, I'm looking for a stressed seller, someone who needs to sell. So that's all good. But you've got to be hands-on. You've got to be ready. You've got to be there. Make the decision now and go ahead with it, because as soon as there are 2 buyers that are interested in that same stressed seller's apartment, the price is no longer going to be a metzia. It's now going to be back to the market, and everything's going to be the same. Another huge difference, especially if you are going to service a mortgage on the apartment, is when you take an apartment from a new development, there is going to be a period of time that you're going to have to service the mortgage from capital. Whereas if you take a resale, you can probably 90% of the time, you'll be able to service your mortgage from the rent that can be generated immediately, which is a big thing. As far as the purchase tax concerned, we're going to discuss it in our next one. But generally speaking, the big difference is if you're buying it as an ole, you're allowed to take occupation. You've got to make aliyah within 1 year of completion. Okay? Whereas in a resale, it's 1 year after the contract. Now, if we put that into perspective, the year after completion could be, if we're signing the contract today, the development will be completed in another 3, maybe another 2 or maybe 3 years. And then a year after that. Whereas if I'm in a resale, we sign the contract today, it's a year from the contract that I have to complete my aliyah. So again, we're talking about the pressure, whether you've got all your ducks in a row, and you're ready to go.
Right. And one of the things that always surprises people that we work with is the speed at which things sell or rent out. You know, it's very much a seller's market and an owner's market. And I know that's, you know, across many markets throughout the world, but in Israel, it's like literally like hotcakes that are selling off the shelf, flying off the shelf. When we talk to people, you know, it's something that if they don't have everything set up and kind of plan through, whether it's the financing or a real estate lawyer, by the time they get that done, the apartment or the home could be very likely gone. So, you know, still, we strongly recommend everyone, everyone does their due diligence, and you don't want to buy anything on impulse, but just be aware that things, if they price right in a good area, don't sit on the market long. And so it's just something that you need to think through and be prepared for as you plan for your purchase.
I just want to touch on another thing regarding the building index, because not a lot of people understand what the building index is all about. Building index is basically, it's actually there to protect the buyer. It's something that is set by the government in order to protect the buyer so that the developer doesn't go bankrupt because the price of steel has gone through the ceiling or the price of concrete or whatever it is. So these are things that the government have actually set as an index in order so that the developer will not go bankrupt because of whatever has happened on the prices of his costs. Now, and as a result of that the developer won't try and cut corners in order to save, in order to make his deal work. So the building index is always going to be based on money that has not been paid. Again, if the apartment is 2 million shekels and we've paid 1 million shekels at the contract, our next payment will be on the 1 million shekels that has not been paid, will be linked to the building index.
Okay.
Okay, so there's a couple of questions here that might be worthwhile answering now while we're actually on the subject rather than wait to the end. Someone's asking here about a new development. What are the risks? Can a contractor go bankrupt? Okay, I can answer this. There's a law in Israel where contracts are signed. It's called Chok Mecher. What it means is when you're buying off a contractor, the term of the building may be, let's say, for argument's sake, 3 years. So you sign the purchase contract and you put the agreed amount down, which is it reaches to 20%. It may be 7% at the beginning, and you get a lot. The bank gives the lawyer, the purchaser's lawyer, vouchers, and each payment can only be paid in the bank via the vouchers. And for every payment that gets made, the bank gives a bank guarantee. So you have a payment every 6 months. You have, during the period, you may have 10, 12 bank guarantees. Once the apartment is completed and received according to the contract, only then will the lawyer hand them back. If for any reason something happens to the builder and is unable to complete the contract, the bank will continue with the complex and the building according to the contract. If it says it's going to be a swimming pool and a tennis court and a guard, it'll be exactly according to the contract. So in the end, the buyer will get exactly what he's ordered. So the risk is zero. Gone are the days where you give a check to Mr. Cohen, is the builder. It's not allowed, and it doesn't happen. So the risk.
I'll just go further on what Darren just said, is that the developer, when a developer has a bank who's actually going to be following the project, and he's going to be, when you make your payments, you're not paying the developer. You're paying the money into an escrow account at the bank, and the bank is giving the developer pocket money as he goes along, and completes the project. The more he goes, the more money he's going to be getting. So you're not actually paying the developer at all. All your money is actually going into an escrow account by the bank. Now, not only that, is when you take occupation, a year after occupation, we have what we call a shnat bedek, where all the owners need to sign that all the snags have been completed. And only then does the developer actually get the balance of all his money. So I would say it's pretty safe.
Okay, there's a few questions on this, Selwyn. One person's asking here, the bank would find a new contractor. Well, the answer would be yes. Each situation may be different, but it's the bank's responsibility to complete within a time scale. So if the bank needs to find a new contractor, then that's what would happen. Okay, there's another question here regarding the purchase tax. If you have not yet made a lien, you buy on paper, is the tax still due 1 year after completion or 1 year after the contract is signed?
I suggest on the purchase tax, let's talk about that, because there are a lot of aspects where once we're talking about the purchase tax, I think that will come up and we'll be able to answer questions that are being mentioned now.
Okay. Fine. Okay. So do you want to move on to the next topic, which is buying a house versus buying an apartment?
Yeah, we're ready for that slide now. Okay, buying a house as opposed to an apartment is really a personal preference. One is not better than the other. Israel predominantly has more apartments than it does houses, but it really depends. Not every area has houses, and not every area has apartments. And as Selwyn said at the beginning, also Rafi, it depends on the purpose. A house is more maintenance. So an apartment is what we call a lock up and go. If somebody wants to travel between a few different countries, they can lock an apartment up, go home, and then come back and turn the electric on, and they're back to normal. A house needs more maintenance. You've got a garden, you may have a swimming pool, a winter, and a house will need more maintenance during the winter. So it's just pure. It's also down to budget. Houses, depending on the size, can be more expensive, depending on the area. So it's purely a personal preference. People that come from countries like the US or South Africa that live in very large homes, the thought of selling their big home and buying an apartment of 130 meters is sometimes very, very difficult for them. But in our experience, the actual thought of it is more difficult than it actually happening, because a lot of people sell big homes and they declutter the home, they arrive here and they move to an apartment of 120, 130 meters. And most times it works and they're happy. But there's people that want to live the same kind of lifestyle, they want a large home and are willing to buy a house for that. So it's purely personal preference. Right. What's next, Rafi?
The purchase tax, going into details.
Okay, this is Selwyn's domain.
All right. So what we're going to discuss over here is what we call, if I'm not mistaken, I think the South Africans call it stamp duty. Everybody in his own country has his own terminology for it, but here we have purchase tax. So we have actually on the screen, you see two different categories. In other words, you'll have a foreign resident, you have a new immigrant, and we have a first-time buyer. Okay, so a foreign resident in Israel is considered not a first-time buyer. So automatically, your purchase tax is going to be 8% from the very first shekel. And the reason being for that is the government are saying, well, it's like an investment. So if an Israeli were buying a second apartment, he'd be considered also an investor, and therefore his purchase tax would be 8% from the very first shekel. When again, as a new immigrant, as an Ole, goes according to tax brackets. So here you can see on a 2.8 million shekel apartment for a foreigner or an investor who's buying a second apartment, the purchase tax, and it's the same purchase tax for a new development and for a resale. There's no differential between the two, but for a foreign register, it's going to be 8%, which is 224,000 shekels, as opposed to a new immigrant, which is going to be 54,368 shekels. I'm just going to go, can we just go on to the next slide, Rafi?
Yep.
So here what we see is for an Israeli resident, in other words, for a first-time buyer, the purchase tax is going to be 44,000. So for the Ole, it's actually, the Ole is actually going to be paying more than it is as an Ole Chadash. So sometimes it's not always correct to use your Ole rights in the beginning. It's sometimes better to use, if you've done both, you've both made Aliyah and you're a first-time buyer, well then it's obviously worth your while for a few reasons to use your perk as a first-time buyer. Now, another reason for that is if I'm going to be making a purchase as an Ole, I won't be able to use the perk, the exemption of a first-time buyer in 3 or 4 years' time. Whereas if I do it the other way around, I've used my perk as a first-time buyer first. I then have 7 years to have to use my perk as a first-time buyer, as an Ole Chadash, which means you can actually buy 2 apartments and save on the purchase tax, which is a big plus. But it's important to do it in the correct, which perk you're going to use first. Are you going to use first your first-time buyer and then your purchase tax, and then your perk as an Ole? Because if you use the first one, you're no longer a first-time buyer. Your Ole will always be there with you for 7 years. The question then is, there's another thing that we've got to look at. If we can go on to the next slide, please, Rafi. So the question is, when do you pay your purchase tax, first of all? So in any event, even if it's a new development or on a resale, your purchase tax will always be paid within 45 days of signing the contract. But here's the difference. When you're coming as an Ole Chadash, you will get your money back. You will put in a request stating that you've made Aliyah. In a new development, as I said earlier, it will be 12 months from completion, as opposed to when you're buying a resale, it will be 12 months from signing the actual contract. So you'll pay the full purchase tax as a foreigner or as an investor, and you will then get your money. You will get the balance. You will be credited for the time that you haven't used it. Okay.
So there's a couple of questions on the chat here. People asking about this.
Let's have a look and see.
Just open that.
Okay.
So I think people were a little confused with the details. So maybe if you can go, somebody said, how long are you considered an Ole Chadash for the purpose of a purchase tax?
All right. So first of all, considering as far as an Ole Chadash, you are 7 years. You have 7 years to use the exemption or to use your rights as an Ole Chadash which will actually give you, which will give you the right of a reduction in the purchase tax. So if I'm going to start it from, I'll go through the process again, just so that we can hear about, and we can go through the actual, what are the stages and what's to do first. So if you buy an apartment, you're always going to pay purchase tax. But if you're going to buy purchase tax, you have, first of all, you're going to have to pay as a Ole Chadash or as a new immigrant. There isn't much difference between the two. Yes, when we go to the higher end of the apartments, it is crucial, because then it is worthwhile using the purchase tax as a Ole, as opposed to the purchase tax as a first-time buyer. But the main difference is, which right do you use first? If you're going to use the purchase tax as a first-time buyer, then you will be able to use your Aliyah rights for another 7 years. If you do the process the other way around, you lose the benefit of a first-time buyer. I hope that is understood.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then you said another question here. Did you say that the purchase tax has to be paid in full within 45 days of signing the contract?
Correct. Purchase tax needs to be paid. It may have changed now, but it was 45 to 60 days from signing the contract. But there is something over here as well, especially on a new development, where you can pay defer your purchase tax up until when you've paid 50% of the value of the apartment. But then you're going to be subject to 4% interest.
Okay. Somebody mentioned here that they'd heard that 12-month period may be extended to 18 months for the refund. Have you heard of that, or is that?
No, I haven't heard anything.
Okay.
I haven't heard anything about that.
Okay. Let's move on, and then we can always come back to some of these questions towards the end. So the next slide here is talking about the purchase process.
There's just one other thing here,
yes.
Rafi, that's in. Do you have to be an Ole at the time of the purchase in order to get the Ole benefits? And the answer is that you are going to buy your apartment as a non-Ole, because you have to make your Aliyah, you have to complete your Aliyah process within a year of either signing the contract in a resale, or complete your process within a year of taking occupation in a new development.
Okay. Great. Okay, so the next topic is the purchase process. So I'll hand it over to you.
Okay. So the purchase process starts with the purchase process starts with we've now found an apartment we like. We've gone past the pilot trip. We've found the apartment. We've negotiated the price. We've negotiated the terms. We've negotiated everything to do with the purchase. This is a stage to meet a lawyer. Obviously, it's always better to meet a lawyer in person, and to use a lawyer that's either been recommended or someone who's used them, and that they specialize in working in real estate and have a good command of English. So then we meet the lawyer. We speak to the lawyer. At this stage, there's no legal commitment. At this stage, we've not instructed the lawyer. And then when to open a bank, the next one is when to open a bank account. This depends on whether you need a bank account to pay the bills. And we're talking about now when we take possession of the apartment. So if the completion is going to be 3 years building, it's not that necessary now to open a bank account, because normally a lawyer will open an escrow account for the purpose of the purchase. So you can either open a bank account at the beginning or wait till closer till you take completion. Now,
just in regard with that escrow account that the lawyer's going to open in order for you to purchase your property, that the money in that account can only go towards that property. In other words, you can't phone up your lawyer and say, well, listen, I'm coming to stay at the Hilton. Please please make the payment from the escrow account to the Hilton Hotel for my holiday in Tel Aviv. And the bank will not allow it. Money can only go towards the apartment.
Okay. So unlike many countries in the world, once we agree the price and the terms, one important term is the time between completion and closing. In Israel, anywhere up to 6 months is acceptable, and it can be more, it can be less. It's whatever's agreed. There's no normal. So assuming a 6-month completion and closing time is agreed, the next stage is agreeing a payment plan. Now, a payment plan could be something. Let's say there's a 6-month completion. A payment plan could be, let's say, 20% upon signing. Let's say 10% in the end, which leaves 30% to be split between a 6-month period. That's a simple payment plan. It doesn't have to be like that. That's normally how it works. And agreeing a closing date is important because there's penalties. There's penalties if anyone's late handing over or late receiving it. And what's actually included in the sale? So rather than reach the completion day and the buyer says, well, I thought the kitchen appliances were included. And the seller says, well, we never spoke about that. Whatever's included in the contract is that we make a separate list. It becomes part of the contract. Let's say you agree the kitchen appliances and the light fittings, it all gets written down. So there's no complication. And the last one on here is how to deal with the utilities. This is what we do for all our clients. The day comes to take the keys. Now before the final payment's made, we go around with it. We go around with the buyer before he hands over the final payment to make sure that everything is in order and he's not taking anything he shouldn't have done, and there's no damage to the home, and nothing's happened since we signed to completion. There's not been a burst and they've got dampness. So we check everything. At that stage, the final check is handed over and is receipted. So now we've got the issue with how to deal with all the utilities, which is the municipality fees, the water, gas, electric, everything. We take it upon ourselves with the power of attorney for the lawyer to do all the transfers into the correct names. If it's going to go to a tenant, we move it to the tenant. If it's seller to buyer, we help set up all the bank account payments by giving all the correct forms and having them signed correctly. This alleviates a lot of bureaucracy and it makes life very, very easy for people.
And I have to say that this is not common. Most realtors don't go to this extent, and this was one of the things that we noticed right at the beginning when we started talking to the team here, is that they do this, and the utilities can be a nightmare dealing with the companies and dealing with previous owners. And so, the team here at home in Israel, they do it for their clients, and we do it, for our clients around the country, because you want to start off from a clean slate, and you want to make sure your internet's set up. You want to make sure the power, water, electricity, so on and so forth is taken care of. And so, it's something that I just want to reiterate is really one of the valuable services that the guys here in Home in Israel provide.
Also, anybody making Aliyah for the first 12 months of making Aliyah entitled to a large discount for the municipality, which is the Arnona. They're entitled to 85% of the first 100 meters for year one. If you buy an apartment for 150 meters, you get 85% up to 100 meters, and the 50 meters is subject to the full amount. We help do that. In year two, it automatically transfers to the full amount. It's a significant amount of money, and a new outlet is entitled to it. And if you don't have to, you don't do it the first day. Let's say you move into an apartment the next month or 2 months after Aliyah, that's also fine. There's any time within the first year. If you go and live with family for 9 or 10 months, after that we can arrange it. Okay, that finishes that slide. Okay. Now, at the moment, we talked about purchasing an apartment. Not everybody purchases. Many people rent an apartment. It has its advantages and disadvantages. So should one decide to rent an apartment, it's the same, we've got to agree the terms. Now, most apartments that get rented out in Israel come empty. Empty as in no furniture, no light fittings, no kitchen appliances, no closets. This is the norm. If there's anything that should be included in it, it's got to be written down on the rental contract. All contracts in Israel are written in Hebrew, which makes it really a must to meet with a lawyer and somehow understand it, whether it's having it translated, whether the lawyer translates the main points. It's important to understand the terms of the contract and the liabilities. Also, when to open a bank account, you're going to need a lot of checks, okay? Checks are used very often in renting apartments. The payments, the rent's paid every month by check, not by banker's payment. So checks are given to the owner, checks are given to the utilities, and the securities are also handed also by check. So the terms of the lease would normally be a 1-year lease with a 1-year option for the tenant. It could be 2 years option. It depends what's agreed, and an agreed moving in date. Normally, a security deposit is requested. The maximum allowed is 3 months. And a lot of landlords insist on this. This is a security deposit in the form of a bank guarantee, which the money then stays with the tenant, and the bank give a bank guarantee, and then the money is guaranteed by the bank. Or it can be simply transferred to the lawyer and stays in escrow, and if there is any interest, the tenant will receive it. 14 days after the end of the lease, the owner will come along, check the apartment, make sure there's no damage, no money owing, all the bills are paid, and then they'll just hand over the deposit back to the tenant. That's normally, and then the lawyer will actually check that the person renting the apartment is actually the legal owner. It has happened, not many times, that somebody signs the contract, receives the first month in cash, and he's not even the owner. So you don't hear many of these stories, but it does happen. The lawyer will then check who the legal owner is, and he's the only person that can sign the contract. So it is important. What's next, Rafi?
Now we're going to get into a few buying opportunities that you may be interested in. Okay.
We're talking now in the city of Netanya, in the north of Netanya on Nitza Boulevard. The picture we see is a brand new project. It's called Savion City by one of Israel's largest building contractors. If anybody's heard of the term Pinui Binui, this is what Pinui Binui was. Before the buildings were built, there were lots of small buildings. I think there were 8 of them in total, and a contractor came along and agreed with all the tenants, all the owners, that they would knock them all down and rebuild brand new buildings. And when they're built, every person that had an old apartment would receive a brand new apartment. So it's happening a lot in Israel now. So this specific project is about 330 meters from the sea. 2 buildings are completed and people are living in them. And the 2 buildings that are closest to us on the picture are just starting to be built now. So there's 3 bedrooms and 4 bedrooms. The first two buildings have been very popular with many people from overseas. There's no swimming pool, there's no security guard, which makes the expenses low. There's a Shabbat elevator. It's a very nice lobby. All the parking is underground. I'll give you an idea. Of prices. Here we are. Okay. So we're talking. I think. Okay, we go here. Okay. So I'm going to get the prices for you. Okay. So the project's going to be ready. The two rear buildings are going to be ready in 3 years' time. And a 3-bedroom apartment, which in Israel is called a 4-room apartment, is 110 meters with a 14-meter balcony. Now, if we start from the 11th floor, the price is 2,670,000 shekels. This is before discount, before negotiating. And the 5-room apartments are 135 square meters, which have 4 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms, and they have a larger balcony. And that's starting from the 9th floor, and that's 2,820,000 shekels. Now, just to give you an idea, the 2 front buildings have been occupied, and rental values in these buildings are about 7,500 shekels a month. Now, also incidentally, when renting an apartment of any description, the rent is paid to the owner, and then it's a tenant's responsibility to pay the maintenance, the municipality, and obviously the water, gas, and electric. So when doing your calculations, you've got to bear all that in mind. The rent is 7,500. The municipality will be around about probably just under 1,000 shekels a month. And the Vadabite, which is the maintenance, is 500. So you've got 750 plus almost 1,000 and plus 500. So it's like 9,000 shekels a month plus water, gas, and electric, which in Israel is a lot cheap. The water, gas, electric is cheaper than many other countries. That we do know. So at the moment, there's a pre-sale on this project. So anyone who is interested in finding out any more information, we can discuss it further. There's some attractive discounts and payment terms. And there is also help with the cost of living in the building index. There's help with that. So it's a pretty attractive pre-sale. And, you know, you just make the payments, you get the keys in 3 years, and that can be done. Okay, which neighborhood is this in? Someone's asking. This is in the north of Netanya, which is just behind Nitza Boulevard, which is an area. It's an established area in Netanya on Nitza Boulevard, where there's a Young Israel synagogue. There's 6 or 7 kosher cafes, supermarket. There's 3 English-speaking synagogues. There's Chabad. There's a Young Israel and another one. So it's a soft landing for people coming from overseas. Okay, somebody else is just asking we talk about other areas. Okay, so what we see on the screen here is a street called Yaakov Dori Street, which is along the coast in Netanya, near an area called South Beach, near the Lagoon Hotel, if anybody knows. So this is a building because we've been asked to talk about all different price brackets. So this specific apartment is an older building on the 5th floor. It's 110 meters with 4 rooms, 3 bedrooms, and the asking price is 1,950,000 shekels. So sometimes people see Netanya as 3 or 4 or 5 million shekel homes. We have plenty of those, but we also have homes of 2 million shekels and sometimes even less. So this is a 10-minute walk to the beach. And okay, So now we're looking at Yehuda Hanassi Street, which is also not far from the project of Savion City we saw at the beginning. This is a 90 square meter apartment on the 4th floor. This has got four rooms, 1 bathroom and a guest toilet in good condition in an older building. And the list price is 2,250,000 shekels. Okay, we've got
Darren, sorry,
yeah.
there was a question about the previous product, the Savion. Is that on the beach, or how close is it? How close is it to the sea?
It's 300 meters from the water.
Okay.
Okay, and it's flat. It's not a difficult walk. And as we go to the high floors, let's say floor 16, 17, you're over the buildings in front, and you've got sea view. If that's important.
Okay.
Okay, so somebody just asked, is it close to the water? It's not far from the water.
There are a couple of questions here about if we're going to be talking about other communities. So the spotlight of this webinar is in Netanya, but you can reach out to us. You can reach out to Olim advisors. Like I said, we help people move to different areas, different communities. So the focus in this presentation is Netanya, and that's why Darren and Selwyn are joining here, because that's what they focus on. But if you want to know about other places, reach out to me and we can talk about other locations in Israel.
Okay, the next property here, somebody's asking me about Yamim here, so it means they're familiar with it. And they've asked about a specific project called Brigade Towers. This apartment we're looking at now is, I don't know, a 5-minute walk to Brigade Towers and a less than a 10-minute walk to the beach. For anyone who's not familiar with Yamim is the newest area along the coast in Netanya. It's the south of Netanya. There's a shopping mall, there's all the infrastructure, and it's the only area that's flat to the water, which means there's no cliff, no steps, nothing. Brigade Towers, seeing as we're talking about it, is one of the most luxurious projects, certainly in Netanya, and possibly even in Israel. And the prices in that specific building start from around about 5.5 million shekels. So this one we're looking at now is a 3-bedroom, 4-room apartments on the 1st floor. It has a 25-meter balcony. It has limited sea view, and the list price is 3,850,000 shekels. So you see in the area of Yamim, this is around about the starting price, just under 3.9 million shekels. And then from then, they can go to 10, 15, 20 million shekels. The area of Yamim is particularly popular with non-Israelis and a lot of English speaking, a lot of South Africans, lots of religious people, lots of young families. It's a real mixture. It's a very nice place to live. Where are we up to now? So, Rafi?
That's it. That's the information. I'm just going through the questions now to see if there's any questions that we might have missed. Somebody had asked about the typical fees that agents charge. Can you just talk about the agents that represent the seller and the buyer and how it works in Israel, which may be different from other countries?
Okay. For every transaction, there's 2 sides. There's a purchaser and a seller. Each side is represented by his own agent, which means if somebody approaches us, and it happens often, they say, we'd like you to represent us, okay? We'd like you to represent us in everything we see. And that doesn't mean they're signing an exclusivity agreement with us, but they want us to represent them. So our job is to find them every single unit that suits their requirements, which means we have listings of our own. We've got limited listings. There may be a different office that has the listing that suits our client. So we will cooperate with the other agent, and we will eventually, assuming there's a contract signed, the buyer and the seller will both pay their respective agents 2% plus VAT. Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Most agents in Israel at the signing disappear and you never see them again. We, as Selwyn and Rafi said, It's like we call it a marriage. Okay, we are here for, no, I won't say forever, but for anything anybody needs for many years to come. And that's what we do.
There's a question here about can one spouse make aliyah and get the benefits? And so it's called a split aliyah. And in short, the answer is yes. And whether you're talking about a mortgage or purchase tax, it is possible. A lot of it depends, of course, on the situation. But many people do that, especially people where maybe one individual is still working. Then this concept of a split aliyah is an option, and people do it. I also saw. Sorry, go ahead.
Correct. People do it for many different reasons. But a couple is one entity, so you can only get the rights as a married couple. It's one the wife can't get, and then a year later the husband gets. A wife and husband is one person.
Right. There's a question here about how many days in the year do you have to be living in Israel to get the benefits? And the official number is 180 or 183, but the tax authority looks at different aspects, like where your business is and the family. And so this is also something that needs to be looked into on a case-by-case basis, because it's not one size fits all.
Correct. What the government don't want to do is people come over to Israel for a couple of months, make aliyah, take all the benefits, and leave. So right. they want it to be the main place of living, the center of life.
Right. Okay, and just looking at the clock, I see that we've run a few minutes late. We try to get to everybody, and I want to again thank you, Darren. Thank you, Selwyn, for joining us tonight. I hope you appreciate the information. You found it informative, and I really want to again encourage you to reach out to us. There's a lot of nuances of the situation. Also, as Darren was alluding to earlier, there is no central listing like there is, for example, in the US, the MLS. So you really want to work with an agent that is well connected, an agent that can go out and find what you're looking for, which can be challenging at times, but the right agents will do that. And of course, we at Olim Advisors work with agents and, with the network to make sure that we can find what you're looking for. So feel free to reach out to us. Like I said, we are going to send out the recording in a couple of days, within the next day or two. So you'll have that. We just want to encourage you to continue with your searches, and let us know if there's anything that we can do to help you. And we wish you, of course, good health and a great week, and thanks for joining us. And be on the lookout for other webinars, because we're going to be doing them on a regular basis. And if there's certain information that you need or that you're looking for, reach out to me, and we'll be happy to put webinars together that will be informative and helpful. So thanks again, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Have a great week, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Rafi. Thanks to all of you. And we hope this was informative. And if there are any questions regarding the purchase tax, how, when, or where, reach out and we'll give you all the information that there is.
Great. Take care, everyone. Have a good day.
Bye, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.